you so much for tuning in today to our glaze profile for macadamia. My name is Carmen. I am one of the designers here at Mako, and we are going to get just right to it. So to start off, we have our jar of glaze here. Macadamia is a creamy vanilla colored glaze that has a matte finish and it breaks well over texture. So over texture, you're gonna showcase some of this beautiful gold coloring where it pools, and you might get a little bit of a sheen as well from that matte texture. So on our jar here, we have our sample tile, which had 3 coats of glaze applied, and it was fired to cone 6. If you notice on the label here, it says that our stoneware glazes are recommended to be fired from cone 5 up to cone 10. These are showcasing the cone 6 results. So as you'll see today, there is variation in the performance within this recommended spectrum. And then just some general label information on the side here. We have our dinnerware safe recommendation, and if you do have an older jar that doesn't have this on it, you can always find it on our website. So look up the product on our website, and under additional information we'll have the dinnerware safe standing of that glaze. And then another important thing is the lot number. So if you do have any issues with glazes or report anything to technical, the first thing we're going to ask for is this lot number. So make sure to keep track of it and just send it along. Or if you use dry glazes, we recommend logging the lot number in a notebook or writing it on the bucket so that you have that information if you do have any issues. So first, let's check out what macadamia looks like in this kind of environment on a larger tile. So here we have our cone 6 tile. I've applied 1, 2, and 3 coats here. You can see that beautiful gold color that happens in the pooling along with this nice matte vanilla color. So as the glaze is applied heavier, you see 3 coats gets more of this gold color. And if you can tell, it does have a bit of a shine to it as opposed to the rest of the finish here. That is a nice soft matte color. And then on the back here, we have it on a flat surface. So you're still gonna get a lot of that variation based on your application. So if you would like to have more of this variation, kind of be mindful of how you're applying it with your brush, allowing it to pool and have variation in the thickness, and that's where you're gonna get this kind of variation. And actually, I do want to showcase application demo while I'm doing this here. I forgot to kind of start it. So starting out, I'm just going to show how to apply 3 coats of glaze. It's really easy to apply glaze thin, so I just want to make sure everyone knows how to apply a proper coat of glaze. So I like to use a soft fiber fan brush. This is our number 4 fan. We do have a larger fan brush for if you're applying glaze to a larger surface or you happen to naturally be a little light-handed with your glazes. The number 8 fan is a nice recommendation for applying glaze there. So I've got my tile here. I'm just gonna do it in the same format that I have right here. So I'll do 1, 2, and 3 coats, and then a full 3 coats on the back. So I basically stir my whole head of my brush into the glaze here, and it's almost really dripping when it comes off, and I really lay that glaze on there. So you want to make sure you're applying enough material to coat the surface of the piece. So we're not just trying to cover the white, we're trying to build up material. So there's 1 coat. You see it's still pretty thick. It's going to take a little bit to dry. If your first coat is drying immediately, you might want to put a little bit more glaze on. The first coat will dry pretty quickly, but it's not necessarily going to be instant. So we'll check the back here. So you can see I'm starting to dry, but I do have some nice wet spots still. So I'm just going to set this aside for now, and we can go over our cone 5 results. So here we've got our comparison for cone 6 and cone 5, and I was actually really surprised with this result. I even fired the cone 5 test twice. So I fired 2 different cone 5 tests because if you see here, there's a lot more gloss on the cone 5 result. And the application isn't really any different. I did 1, 2, and 3 coats. So when you're firing to cone 5, you are going to see more of this golden color, and it could be a little bit shinier than the cone 6 result. So it's going to be a bit warmer, but you're not going to get as much of this striation. So we'll see it on the back a little bit here. So this is a little bit more of like a flat, kind of semi-glossy gold color, whereas the cone 6 results has a little bit more variation between the finish as well as the color. So that's cone 5 and cone 6. Check out our tile here. So this guy is pretty dry. We have a little bit of a wet spot here. I'll go ahead and check out our cone 10 results, and then we'll add a second coat onto our tile here. So here I've got our cone 10 results compared to the cone 6 results. On the front of this cone 10 tile here, I do have 3 coats instead of 1, 2, and 3 coats. Just so keep that in mind. So here's the color difference between the cone 10 reduction and the cone 6 tile. So this has a little bit more gray, it's a bit more matte, and some more variation too. So you can see it did have a little bit of movement. I reseeded my coats, so I only had 3 coats up to here, and it did move down a bit. But nothing crazy. It's not highly mobile or anything like that. But I do love this variation that happens here with the orange, the gray, and the gold. And so this is cone 10 reduction versus cone 6. All right, we'll go ahead and apply our next coat of macadamia here. Go ahead and load my brush up really well. You see how nice and full of glaze that is. And so I'll do the same format. So this will be 1, 2, 3 coats. So there's the front. That first coat's spread on really nice. And once you get your first coat on, the glaze will apply a bit smoother. You never want to feel your brush drag though. So make sure you have enough material on your brush that it's not dragging on your piece. So there we've got 2 coats. And this will take a bit longer to dry. All right, so here are our flux results. So on this tile here, I've applied 2 coats of flux directly to the bisque in about a 1-inch band. So here I've got light flux, here I've got dark flux, and then I applied 3 coats of the macadamia on top of the flux here. So you can see this beautiful kind of crystallizing that happens along with the flux, and I love this warm orange color that's brought out by the dark flux. A lot of the time dark flux will bring like a brown or a blue variation, but I really like how this is actually a nice black color. And then it fades into this pretty purpley almost and then orange. So macadamia looks really, really nice with our fluxes, and the glaze itself is very stable, but in combinations it can add a bit of mobility, so it works really, really well with the flux to have some mobility but not too much. And then on the back here, this is what flux looks like over macadamia. So first I applied 3 coats of macadamia, 2 coats of flux to the top 1-inch band, and then that moved down here. So you can see the interactions are pretty similar. Sometimes there will be a discrepancy between over and under. With macadamia, it seems to be pretty close in performance. You're getting this lovely white, this crystallizing, and this kind of transparent part. So all of those are present on the front and the back of this tile. And then we have our cone 10 with flux. So here we have the same application. This is 2 coats of flux over macadamia. And I've noticed this a lot in our cone 10 reduction results, but the flux doesn't move as much as it does here. Some glazes are more matte at cone 10 for some reason, which this one is one of those glazes. It could be the reduction that's happening to it, because it's really surprising that the more heat work doesn't create more mobility. But you do still have that nice black color happening here, and you get more of like a beige or sandy color with the light flux at cone 10. And then we have our alternative clay body firings. So on all of these, we fired to cone 6 with a 10-minute drop hold. So a drop hold, if you're not familiar, that's basically you reach your peak temperature and then it drops and then you hold at a lower temperature than the peak temperature. So we do our drop hold at 2150 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's only maybe 100 degrees less than the top temperature, but that seems to help with surface issues. Not to say macadamia would have surface issues without the hold, but we just use that as a standard when firing different clay bodies, just as a preventative measure. So if you do have surface issues on different clays, maybe try doing a hold, maybe try doing a drop hold, and see if that helps at all. Here we have our macadamia on a white speckled clay. It performs really, really nicely. These speckles come through beautifully. We have that gold variation and this lovely vanilla creamy breaking over this texture here. Here we have it on a brown speckled clay, so sort of similar. The speckles come through really, really well. This finish is a little bit drier than it is on the dark star, but you still do have some of this gloss where it's applied heavy or where it's pooling. And then the dark brown clay. This is really, really dry here, but we're not getting like a lot of blistering or anything. So it's kind of like a sandy finish, but not like rough to the texture, just like really, really dry, I guess, if you can tell that there's no shine. But it looks kind of cool. It'd be a nice surface, maybe not for a functional piece, but it's really interesting. All right, let's check on our tile here. So we're pretty dry. All right, so we'll go ahead and add our third coat here. This pooling that's happening here, I'm just gonna go ahead and add the third coat because I know that that's heavy in that area. If you have wet areas on flat spots, then you might wanna just wait a little bit longer. But since I know that this is really heavy in this pooling, I'm just gonna go ahead and apply my third coat. So the third coat goes on nice and easy because it's such a small surface. So one nice stroke there, but you can see how easily that brushed on there. And same with this guy. And glazes that have variation with this, or really most stonework glazes, I like to kind of just pull the brush in a bunch of directions so we don't end up with anything too streaky. So this is how I got these results. This was the same application. And then finally, let's review how this glaze performs in combination. Like I had said previously, it does add some mobility, although it is pretty stable on its own. It can enhance the mobility of glazes that it's paired with. So here we have Cenote over Macadamia. And Cenote does have a little bit of mobility, so you can see it is moving somewhat. There's some color influence, and mostly the Macadamia made this simply move more rather than adding a lot of other color here. You can see it breaks a little bit with kind of that vanilla color, but for the most part, the Cenote is the primary color you see here. We just have some mobility from the Macadamia. And then here we have Rainforest over Macadamia. Rainforest is a pretty highly mobile glaze, so we do have a decent amount of mobility here. Nothing pooling at the bottom, which I'm kind of surprised about. On all these combinations, we do have 2 coats of each glaze applied. So I'd say if you applied maybe 3 coats of one of these glaze, you would have more mobility. A lot of the time, applying more glaze, especially glazes that can be somewhat mobile, will make them very, very mobile. So here I love this crystallizing that happens, and I'm a big fan of the glossy matte variation here too. But again, the pigment and the color mostly is the Rainforest here. The Macadamia is simply adding some surface and mobility variation. And here we have black walnut applied over Macadamia. And this is a really typical performance for black walnut. It often adds this like iridescent, mirrored finish to glazes when you're using it in combination, which I think is really, really cool. Kind of messing up my focus on the camera even. But it even has these micro crystals. I love the variation fading from the matte into this highly glossy finish. So again, Macadamia is adding mobility, it's adding variation, but it's not adding a lot of color to this combo. And then finally here we have our Honeycomb over Macadamia. So here is where you can kind of see a little bit of color added. And I think that's just the base reacting with the Macadamia. So both of these glazes are really, really reactive. So moving together, they added a lot of mobility and a really, really different color that's happening here. But I love these striations that happen when you have this kind of melt. So we do post monthly combo sheets showcasing 12 combinations at Cone 6 and Cone 10 with our monthly combo glaze. So all of those can be found in the glaze combination gallery of our website. If you liked these, go ahead and check those out more. It's searchable. We have low fire combinations, mid-range combinations, and high fire combinations in there. So it's really, really a great resource to have if you're shopping for glazes or looking for inspiration with glazes that you already have. So please definitely check that out. Also check out the resources page on our website. That's full of different brochures and literature with lots of information about glazes to help you understand how to use our glazes the best. And if you're not watching this on our YouTube channel, please check out our YouTube channel. We have lots of information there as well. We love teaching you guys about our products and giving you the tools to find success when using them. So definitely utilize all of those resources that we have available. And I think that is all that I have today for our Macadamia glaze profile. So thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, make it Mako.